I hope you're in the mood for a rant, because I'm in the mood to rant. Now, I've been thinking about a lot of this stuff for a while, and so there's probably going to be a bunch of ideas all thrown in here. But just stick with me. I'm going to start with some rhetorical questions. Now, first of all, if you were enslaved somehow, would you try to escape? Would you ever volunteer to be a slave? If you were a German in 1939, would you have been standing up against the Nazis, or would you have just done as you were told? Would you have joined them? What if you were a Jew during the Holocaust? Would you have stood in line to board the train knowing exactly how things were going to end? Or would you have at least tried something, anything, no matter how futile, and guaranteed to fail? I mean, at least you tried, right? I mean, better than just going on, marching on, all right? Now, many of you watching this are probably going to say in a second, oh, here we go, and just unsubscribe. But I challenge you to stick with me, because no matter what your opinion on what I'm about to say is, you probably have not heard this perspective, all right? Then argue with me in the comments, please, or post a response video. I know that people used to do that a lot. Here in Colorado, mandatory mask order was just extended for another month. Polis, another month. Here's my question. This social distancing, forced closures of businesses, and now with how the vaccines are being discussed, these vaccine passports and everything, was any of this done with even the slightest consideration towards the consent of the governed? I want to get to that in a moment, but first, I have not deigned to wear a face mask once during any of this. Not once. Right from the start, I recognized something so disturbing, disturbingly intimate, about requiring people to cover their faces in public. Now, maybe it's hyperbolic to see things this way. I don't think so. But it is, to me, a direct form of enslavement. Think about it. Your face, the most immediate aspect of your individual self. Do not allow that, which makes you most identifiably a unique human individual, a person. Do not let it be fully visible in public, to the public. Never mind the reasons given, whether you agree with them or not, because even if they are good reasons, they're not the real reasons behind the mandates. The real reasons for the lockdowns, for that, it's economic. They're not for health, and the same with the masks, and here's why. Right from the start, the rules, here in Colorado at least, but I've seen it everywhere, they allowed people to wear cotton bandanas or whatever. Just, you have to cover your face somehow, and if you want to argue with me, then try to come correct, because I promise you that I have science, actual science, peer-reviewed research supporting me. But that can be argued. For anything other than an N95 mask, and even then, under only the strictest of usage protocols, which nobody follows, their efficacy is at best insignificant towards what is purported to be the rationale behind their mandated use. Insignificant. But honest people can disagree there. What is not insignificant is how deeply intrusive they are on a person's sense of individual sovereignty. One's sense of being a free and equal member of society, and not just subject to arbitrary governance, all right? The psychological damage has been immense, especially when it comes to children whose their proper mental and emotional development requires a healthy degree of interaction with other humans. Their faces, other humans' faces, not a blank piece of cloth. They need to see that in order to learn how to pick up on nonverbal communication, as well as to communicate nonverbally themselves. I mean, maybe they'll learn to compensate with more hand gestures or something, Anyway, as well as learning to properly articulate words, actually. If most of what an infant or toddler is hearing as they learn early vocalizations, it's muffled, well, we'll see. And if you have young kids and you constantly speak to them through a face mask, then you'll see. But also the social, psychological fracturing that's been going on. There's plenty of examples in the media from this past year. First and foremost, those riots that caused incalculable harm to people and to property, the public psyche, so to speak, because of the sense of anonymity that one's face being covered generates. I mean, does anyone think that the riots and the arsons and all done in broad daylight, in full view of police and video cameras, dozens of cities, all summer long, does anyone think that was not at least exacerbated by the fact that everyone was not merely excused, but mandated to don the most specifically recognizable piece of attire that Antifa has been hiding behind for years, those cowardly scumbag punks, all right? Cowards. Braving a mob and behind a mask to hide their identity. But, all right, I'm going off on a tangent, but so I want to talk about a specific incident that happened to me the other day because I refuse to wear a face mask and will not be coerced under any circumstances, all right? The most recent of many incidents happened to me the other day, but the most provoking. I was told back in August by some loser working at a shitty burrito place in West Texas, of all places, that I needed to be wearing a face mask while eating a goddamn burrito as I was sitting outside. But that's not what I want to talk about. This happened the other day at the Wheat Ridge Animal Hospital, which is in the West Denver metropolitan area, if you don't know. So, hang on, let me stop this call. Our dog Dumpling, little Shih Tzu, she had diarrhea for a couple of days, and on Thursday, I was working down in my office. I hadn't seen her for a couple of hours. She'd been fine. My wife comes home and she sees that Dumpling can't walk. She can't get up. So we're like freaking out, and we go to the animal hospital. And the girl who checked us in, they had the whole curbside pickup thing. She's, perfectly fine, really nice, and so we're out there waiting in the car. Finally, the vet calls and she says, she asked me, well, what's going on? So I explained to her, and I say, like, she's had diarrhea for a few days, but she's been fine, peppy and everything, maybe a little bit lethargic. But then, like, about 2 hours before my wife got home was the last time I'd seen her, because the Amazon guy showed up, and so she jumps down off the chair to go and bark, and she was, she seemed fine. But then, like, 2 hours later, my wife comes home, and that's next time I see her, and she's like not doing well. So this vet, she's like, well, here's what I think. After I tell her what I think is going on, because I've done some research. I tell her, that there is a correlation, not causation or not known causation, between dogs that dogs can get diarrhea and then they lose function, like with their legs. And she's like, well, where'd you hear that? I was like, well, from a vet website. She's like, oh, okay, the internet. Well, yeah, I know it's the internet. So it's like, well, do you want to know what I think is going on? I was like, well, yes, of course. I think that she hurt her back when she jumped off that chair. Do you mean the thing that I just told you that you didn't know about when you first called me? And so she thinks I need to take her to a neurologist, a specialist. So I'm like, all right, well, let me call around. And I tell her, we'll just go over and we'll pay the fee. So I call a neurologist, a veterinary neurologist, and I go over with the credit card to pay. I meet at the door as she's coming out, and she's like, oh, do you have a mask? It's like, oh, no, but we're in a hurry here. Let me just hand you the card. So she takes it from me, all scared like, and goes back in. And then we sit and we wait. And then about 10 minutes later, she calls and says, all right, I'm coming out with Dumpling. Oh, no, she didn't call. She had started walking out. That's right. Now we're parked over in the car in the parking lot. So she's walking. I see her as she's coming close. So I jump out and I go to take the dog. She's got the credit card. She's got the dog. And she's like, do you have a mask? I was like, no, I don't. And she's like, well, I need you to wear a mask. She's holding my damn dog a couple feet from my car. I'm ready to take the dog and leave. She's like, not going to give me the dog. She's not going to give me Dumpling. If my wife weren't there at that moment, I don't know, she probably would have had the police called on me or something, because I was about to just go and just take the dog, injured back or whatever, because the transaction's done. And she's holding my damn dog and is not prepared to give it to me because I'm not wearing a mask. Like I'm a leper or something. Do I look sick to you? All right, anyway. Oh yeah, it turns out I was right. There's nothing wrong with her back. it was exactly as I told her. The neurologist was like, yeah, this is what happens a lot. We get a lot of people come in, the dog has diarrhea, it's this whole thing. I won't go into all that, okay? But just try to get back to it, okay? So, yeah, what was I saying? None of us were asked for consent, okay? We weren't asked for consent to destroy our own lives, our businesses, our children's social development, nothing. We were just told what to do. And everyone did it. Measured considerations of the consequences be damned, okay? Because it was a public health emergency. Those who wear face masks, even those to a degree who slavishly enforce other people to wear them, like attempting successfully oftentimes to shame others for not complying with their own supplication to their masters in government. Even they, in a sense, did not consent because they were not given a choice. Now, the fact that I have refused to go along with any of this naked fascism is not evidence that there was always a choice. I mean, technically, we always have a choice, no matter what the situation. But most people are not in a position to so easily comply with authoritarian edicts, or they not necessarily have a particular personality, characteristics of a personality that I do, for better or for worse. But you have to question why. In the face of incontrovertible evidence that none of the measures employed to flatten the curve or slow the spread of a largely insignificant contagion, at far greater cost, mind you, to the lives of billions of people, insofar as abject poverty levels have risen sharply because of the destruction that all of this has done to the global economy. And the qualitative degree of subjugation that has become ingrained into people worldwide. Despite that, recognizing instead that how relatively mild this disease actually was, and just allowing us to go on with our lives unmolested, as a purportedly free people would, these measures are still in effect in many places. I mean, here in Colorado, we keep getting the promise of restrictions. They may be lifted in discrete stages. A year after all this began. 2 weeks to flatten the curve. A year ago, it could be argued that there were too many unknowns, and therefore such measures were prudent. They were poor arguments, easily refuted even then, but the argument could be made nonetheless. After a few weeks, a couple months, we no longer had any legitimate reason for fear, and yet the draconian measures did not ease up. No, instead, the opposite occurred. The goalposts simply kept getting moved back. And it is infuriating to me that the vast majority of people just keep going along with what is obvious to anyone with any capacity for independent thought, for rationality, logic, critical thinking, or just a modicum of suspicion about anything the media has been force-feeding everyone. But everyone has just gone along with it, with what is clearly an enormous lie. The kind of lie that Hitler himself, I think it was, who said it would be believed if it were big enough. And it's being told to further the process of feeding the ever-growing hunger for total control that all governments have. And now almost everyone I know agrees. Almost everyone I meet, if it comes up, as it often does, they all know it's nonsense. I mean, of course, there's going to be some sampling bias there because I'm not likely to force myself into some voluntary, interactions with strangers who are so wildly divergent from me as far as their basic ideas of liberty and human dignity are concerned. Regardless, almost everyone I know, my friends, they all know, at least on some level, that this is all a charade. But few people really want to ask why. And I think it's because to know the answer requires you to change your behavior towards something that is difficult, possibly dangerous. It means resisting no matter what the consequences to your own health, safety, and security. And now why is that? Because to continue going along with the lie, knowing that the outcome is likely to be what it has become, then you would basically have to say that you would be going along with the Germany's and the Nazi Germany's 80 years ago. I mean, because that's what it was with the Germans. I mean, most of them were not Nazis. They didn't have the wherewithal or the conviction or whatever. They just believed that they were alone. And it just boils down to this. When any population finds itself in these sorts of situations, as has happened before and will certainly happen again, and will continue to happen until the entire world is absorbed into the completeness of global totalitarianism, as was the express intent of the Soviets all along. And the threat never went away. It only became far more dangerous and insidious because, like Satan himself, the world was lulled into a false belief that the threat no longer existed. But whenever this happens, the population simply acquiesces to the relinquishing of all rights, to having any control over themselves, to make any decisions about their own lives. And they do it because a small percentage of the people actually prefer things that way. Just so long as everyone else, but they're betters in government and the media, of course, then, they receive special privileges. But so long as everyone else must suffer under totalitarianism equally, then it's fine. It's worth it to them. Because they never wanted any liberty in the first place, because it comes with too much responsibility, too much insecurity, too much inequity. But neither could they tolerate living with the alternative of liberty. Whilst they cannot live with it, with that lockdown stuff, if their neighbor was enjoying their liberty, because it wouldn't be fair. The liberty, they don't even want it for themselves, but it wouldn't be fair if others got to have that liberty. All right? Wouldn't be fair to those who happily volunteer to be slaves, unless the involuntary are enslaved equally, equitably. Anyway, Dumpling's gonna be fine. I'm sure that's probably what most of you are waiting to hear. We just picked her up today. Yeah, she's just had a little thing. Just something that happens. But it was just such a, I've dealt with this stuff for a year now. I refuse to wear a mask because even like I say, even if the reasons were good, even if the mask actually helped, I would still not wear them. Still don't wear one, because I know that the reasons are not about health, not about public safety. It's about enslavement.